Why am I on mute? Okay, don't worry. Hey guys, welcome to the Adam Peter Fitness Podcast. Today I have a really special episode for you guys. This is something I get asked quite a lot in the DMs. Basically, we're going to be going over safer use models of using special sports supplements or performance enhancing drugs. Because I think this is something that is, especially with the recent bodybuilding deaths, people are becoming a little bit more woke on, I guess is what you could say. We're a little bit more aware of, health is really important. And, Broderick Chavez always says that health is permissive of performance. So that's one of the reasons why I think it's really good to understand like what you're doing to your bodies, how to use these enhancements if you do decide to go that route in a safer manner. So I decided to ask Mircea Balaj. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your last name right or your first name, but
Good.
He's from Romania. He works directly under Broderick or with Broderick, and has a ton of in the Team Evil GSP Facebook group is just super helpful, giving you tons of really good feedback to everybody in that group. And he does a bit of bodybuilding himself. Mircea, do you want to give it tell anybody know anything about you that I missed?
Sure. And first off, thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be on your podcast. This is awesome. So just to get into things, I don't want to talk a lot about myself. My name is Mircea. I'm Broderick's research assistant and understudy and coach for Team Evil GSP. My background, so to say, is not scholastic background, is not in biology or pharmacology, but I've studied intensely under Broderick's direct supervision, and I do, as Adam said, a lot of managing stuff in the forum, a lot of coaching, a lot of article writing, book writing, and so on. To be completely honest, that's about all I have to say about myself. There's not a lot to it. Let's get into the meat of things.
Awesome. So I think the first thing that I wanted to go over is considerations people should actually take before they do decide to go down this route. And by the way, anybody who does want to learn a lot about this stuff should absolutely join Broderick's member site. He does actually go over this in his practical application series. But this is something that I think people need to be aware of. Like, what should you be aware of? What should you consider before you actually do to start taking performance enhancements? So. Was your mind going over that?
Yeah, sure. Well, first off, is you always have to have a reason. It doesn't matter if your reason is to be the best at your sport, to be, the best bodybuilder, if your reason is financial, if your reason is, just to pick up girls at the beach, you have to first have a reason to do so. After that, I think the most important thing would be to know what you're getting yourself into. Research what are PEDs, and PEDs is a very broad spectrum term. It includes anabolics, peptides, growth hormone, insulin, BPC, TB500, so many things. Also includes things like melanotan, clenbuterol, DNP. There are a lot of drugs in the world, and most of them enhance your performance, so they can be called performance-enhancing drugs or PEDs. It's not just steroids. Know what you're getting yourself into, know the risks, know the benefits, and then you can weigh out your own risk-reward ratio. And after that, of course, health is first and foremost. You should always do blood work, always see what's under the hood, even if you're natural, even if you're not going to go the route of performance enhancing drugs, you should still get blood work done, I'd say at least once a year. If you're serious about your sport, I would say a minimum of twice a year would be necessary.
Awesome. I guess as well as something else that I think a lot of kids should be aware of is, there's it's the financial aspect of this, because steroids and other most of these drugs you can get for relatively inexpensive. Like a year long worth of, say you're taking like 250 tests. I mean, if you get that from like a decent lab, that could be less than $500 a year. But then you have to get your health supplements, and that's in getting blood work done. So and this is just addressing a lot of the people that do ask me questions in DMs. That's why I always will say, there, like the two things I always say is, well, if you can't hire a coach or you can't afford a coach, you're not ready for this. Because I do think that that's a good litmus test of do you actually have the financials. And then secondarily, I think something else that everybody does need to consider is that every milligram of HRT is time off your life in some way, shape, or form. You can mitigate a lot of those health risks, and it might be like a minimal time off of your life, but that's something you need to be aware of, and also like look yourself in the face and be like, am I okay with that? And that's I love how Mircea said that's why you need to have a strong why. Like, why are you doing this? Because, and again, like everything else in the broader says this, like you need to like right tool for the right job. So that's I guess a very basic overview of what you can consider before starting, any sort of performance enhancement. So I guess going into the more quote unquote fun stuff that most people are going to be thinking about, what do anabolic androgenic steroids actually do? Because I don't think many people actually know how they like the mechanism of action.
Sure. So I'll start off with the distinction that there is testosterone, which is an androgen, and then there are anabolic androgenic steroids. Testosterone is not an anabolic androgenic steroid. It is an androgen. It is the root male hormone. It appears in females as well, but in small quantities. But it's the primary male hormone. Everything derived from it is an actual synthetic derivation, which is an anabolic androgenic steroid. And if you've been following Broderick, you know the family tree. So there is testosterone, then you have its direct descendants like boldenone, dianabol, turinabol. Then towards the left, we have the DHT, 5-alpha reductase enzyme, converts testosterone into dihydrotestosterone. And then from the DHT side, we have things like Masteron, Anavar, Winstrol, Primobolan. And then going to the right side, we see the 19-nor column, which is created via hydrolysis. Also from testosterone, we have that. We do have a lot of interesting compounds there. We have MENT, which is trestolone, the most powerful, trenbolone, and then we have your nandrolones, which is DECA, NPP. And of course, from testosterone, we also get via the aromatase enzyme, we get estrogen, and that has also a few subvarieties. The main ones being the classic E2 estradiol, estrone E1, and estriol E3. So now we know what androgens are, we know what anabolics are, what they do. Think of it as your testosterone. If you are going to go on HRT or TRT, testosterone replacement therapy, testosterone will replace your own endogenous production. Once you take it, your endogenous production will stop. Now, you need to take enough for you to be male, but not too much to run into secondary side effects, such as too much conversion to DHT, which would lead to mostly negative side effects like prostate enlargement, male pattern baldness, also could lead to acne. And then the overconversion to estrogen would lead to water retention, which could lead to high blood pressure, gynecomastia, and again, the oily skin and acne. Now, what do steroids do? Most people think that they're going to take steroids and they are going to get big. It is very true. There has been the Basin study that shows that taking androgens and anabolics, even in the absence of training or proper nutrition, will lead to hypertrophy of skeletal muscle tissue. So yes, they work. They do have a cost, but they work. Mostly via upregulation of the creatine synthase, upregulation of muscle protein synthesis. You synthesize more protein, therefore the muscle protein breakdown versus muscle protein synthesis, the ratio is more towards the muscle protein synthesis. You synthesize more protein, you become more protein efficient, therefore you do not need as much protein. Some bodybuilders say that you need to take more protein while you are on steroids because you're more protein efficient. I would beg to differ. Because you're more protein efficient, you will need less protein to get the same results. Probably being natural, you'll need to eat more protein because you're literally pissing away most of the protein that you're eating. You're not as efficient at consuming it and at turning it into actual skeletal muscle tissue. Now, androgens have a lot of other benefits. You will see William Llewellyn's book, Anabolics, has a very good description of what testosterone is, what testosterone does, what anabolic androgenic steroids do, some of the side effects. There are a lot of them. If we look at each drug from each family column of the family tree, we're looking at the center columns, which mimic testosterone. They are direct derivatives. We'll see an increase in red blood cell production. We'll see pretty much a conversion to some form of estrogen. Naturally, the more refined the compound is, the less we have estrogenic side effects and the DHT side effects. So as we move towards something like turinabol, we'll see something that has very little conversion to estrogen, very little conversion to dihydrotestosterone, mostly an anabolic. When we go to the DHT derivatives, we see an increase in neurology, which is highly beneficial for strength athletes, for skill acquisition. We see, therefore, an increase in what most people call strength. We see a smaller retention of water, creatine synthase, glycogen synthase. These are not stimulated as much by anabolics from the DHT column. So that's why most bodybuilders call them dry drugs. Your Masteron, your Winstrol, your Anavar, you will not retain as much water. You'll have a more drier physique. Of course, if you eat like an asshole, you're going to get fat anyway. It doesn't matter. No steroids burn fat. But they will lead to less water retention, more contractile protein accrual. Also, there are some compounds that from that column that do have an estrogen suppressing effect, Masteron being the most prominent in that area. It has a small AI and SERM effect. So it inhibits the aromatase enzyme, which converts testosterone into estrogen. And it has a SERM effect, selective estrogen receptor modulator, at actually the breast tissue. That's why this drug has been used to treat breast cancer. Most of the others have the similar effects, but at a very small degree. And then when we go to the 19-nor column, here we see a very big upregulation in glycogen synthase and creatine synthase, very water-intensive drugs, very powerful drugs at driving fullness, volume. You will see a much fuller physique with that. If you have a propensity to retain water, you'll look a bit more bloated, a bit more watery. These are drugs that will be suited, for example, in contest prep when people are on very low calories, very low carbohydrates. They will start to look stringy and flat. This will change that. This will give them fullness. Also, for people who are skinny, lanky, your DECA, NPP type drugs will, yes, they will give you more volume to your muscle. They will fill out your frame in bodybuilding terms, so to say. And also, they do have a DECA and NPP, the nandrolones, do have a small but significant over time effect on joint health. They promote also water retention in the bursa capsule in the joints, and also they have a bit more effect on the protein expression of collagen protein. So we have various benefits and downsides, various mechanisms of action, depending on the family tree and, of course, depending on the compound.
All right. So essentially, so just to reiterate, so all these steroids, like there's always talk about the anabolic androgenic ratio with these steroids. I know there's a lot of debate on lots of message boards and whatnot. I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that each one of these drugs does have the same rate of basic underlying protein synthesis. The difference is you're shopping for different side effects depending upon what column.
Yes, they do. They all so the commonality is they increase muscle protein synthesis, glycogen retention, creatine synthase, glycogen synthase, which are the enzymes that help in these processes. They all build muscle, and then they have different side effects, or I would call them side effects. I would call them secondary effect profiles. And the problem with that androgenic to estrogenic ratio is you might see a drug that has a let's say testosterone is usually the gold standard. It has a 1-to-1 or a 100 to 100 androgenic to anabolic to androgenic ratio. So it is as anabolic, which comes from Greek, which builds, to build, and androgenic, andros also Greek, which means male, that which makes male. So anabolic, androgenic, build muscle, be more male, 1-to-1 testosterone. Once anabolic androgenic steroids have been created, the thought process was, we want to eliminate that make male component and just have something as close to a pure anabolic as possible. Basically what SARMs are trying to be today, and they're failing miserably so. But that's a different story. So each one has its own ratio, and of course, the studies were flawed. They were made in rats. There's a whole story there. Not going to get into it, but the problem is that you see an androgenic to anabolic ratio of 1-to-1 on testosterone, and then we go to something like trenbolone, which is 500 to 500. So the ratio is still 1-to-1, but it's just 5 times as potent as testosterone. Is that something that you would want when you're shopping for anabolics? Maybe, maybe not. It's more potent, but also comes with more side effects. Something like a Primabol, and I think the ratio is, what was it, 80 to 30 anabolic to androgenic, something along those lines. So yes, it's not as potent as testosterone, but it has 30% of the side effects and 80% of the anabolism. So if you take Primabol, you're getting less side effects for slightly less anabolism. That's on a milligram to milligram basis. Now, if we look at nandrolone, I think that has the least amount of androgenic side effects. I think William Llewellyn has coined it exactly that. Nandrolone has the least androgenic virilization side effects out of all the anabolic steroids.
Cool. So essentially, obviously, so Hirschberger assays, obviously, like if anybody who's familiar with them, they're done in rats. A lot of it is just not very applicable to us. It just doesn't really matter, I guess. But what you're kind of saying is that you can basically use these profiles to say, like, okay, like depending upon what side effects you might be prone to, and this is the only way you're going to know this is like actually like through use or whatever. We can shop around a little bit more in the ones that might have a little bit less of those androgenic side effects relative to the anabolic. Is that essentially what I'm hearing?
Right, but not only the androgenic side effects, we're also looking at other side effects each compound has. For example, if you're already on the rounder side, I don't think you're going to need something like a nandrolone, because that will make you even rounder.
Yeah.
But if you're skinny, you might want those secondary effects. On the other hand, if you're a rounder person, you'd probably want to look at something like a Primabol or a Mastron. It will not give you that much, volume to the muscle, that much water retention. So it depends on many side effects and many secondary effects that these compounds have. The anabolic androgenic ratio, first off, rats do not have a prostate. They have something called a seminal vesicle, and they were actually measuring that. So they gave them these anabolic androgenic steroids. They basically killed the rats and saw how much their levator ani has hypertrophy versus how much their seminal vesicle has hypertrophy. So basically they were trying to say, you got this much muscle growth and this much prostate growth. And then they kind of like made a ratio.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Awesome. So I think that's a really comprehensive overview of just the general, like what are anabolics, what do they do, what are each of these drugs look. So I guess another really good question is, so if you were to start off the first cycle, you've done the risk analysis, you decide, yes, this is what I want to do. What would your first cycle be? And then I guess also, do you need testosterone in your astral course design? because I think that's something that a lot of people can talk about. And anybody who's familiar with Broderick, it doesn't necessarily always have to be testosterone, but there has to be some principles that you do follow.
Yeah. So first off, you started by using the word cycle, and then you switched to course.
Yeah.
I noticed that. It's funny.
Roderick L.
Cycle
what got mad at me, and then I felt his wrath, and then I changed my vocabulary.
Yes. So just for the viewers or listeners, cycle implies that it repeats itself, like the cycle of the seasons. You have 4 seasons; they come in cycles. That's a year. A course does not mean that you'd have to repeat it. You can do one course and never touch steroids again. That's totally on you. So for a beginner, I would probably go against bodybuilding dogma and, first cycle, do 500 milligrams of test, and that's it. Well, why do you want to give somebody who is pretty much unsure what they're going to do in the future, they just want to dip their toes in anabolic use, give them something that will give them pretty much all of the side effects that they want to avoid? So if we're looking at 500 milligrams of testosterone for somebody who's maybe, I don't know, 60, 70 kilos, that's 150, 160 pounds, something like that.
Like I think it's like 140 to 160. Yeah.
Yeah, 140, 160. So for somebody who's in that weight category, 500 milligrams of testosterone is more likely overkill and will probably lead to water retention, could lead
10
to
grams for like 10 milligrams per kilo.
Yeah, pretty much. That's like 7, 8 milligrams per kilo. It could lead to water retention. It could lead to estrogenic side effects. Depends on the individual, but more likely than not, that will lead to unwanted effects or side effects. So I think that is not a good idea. Also, because testosterone in your body versus testosterone from an exogenous source, from your local UGL or Merck or Pfizer or Bayer or whatever, they're the same compound. They are the same hormone. Your body will recognize it. And once your body recognizes that it has enough testosterone, it will stop producing its own testosterone. It will suppress its natural production. So what people would call shutdown, which is not a shutdown, it is just a suppression of natural production. You introduce a hormone that your body immediately recognizes, your body's own production will start to be suppressed. But if you introduce a hormone that your body doesn't recognize, something like, let's say, Anavar, your body has no way of recognizing that as testosterone. So while you're taking your Anavar, your body will still produce testosterone to a point. At some point, your body will say, hey, there are androgens in the body. There's something with an androgenic effect in the body. So we're thinking it's testosterone, we're gonna stop producing it. But until the body, catches up to that, there will be a lag time, so to say. So if you're not looking to completely suppress your testosterone production from the get-go, and you want something that has more anabolic effects and less of the androgenic effects, you'd probably be best off going the route of something that is not testosterone. Also, for beginners, the more, let's say, the more risk adverse you are, the more I would probably look at something along the lines of an oral anabolic. Needles scare people. People are scared to give themselves injections. There's also, oh, I'm buying needles. Where am I going to, store them? Where am I going to store the vials of anabolics and so on? So there are a lot of problems that people would face, if they're new to this and they're a bit more risk adverse. With a oral anabolic, that's easy. You just take the tablet, it works, you go about your day. Probably, as we have described on the member site, something along the lines of an oral anabolic, more likely than not a DHT derivative, something like Anavar or Winstrol or Primoval and acetate, if you can find that, which is, I think, more unicorns are a bit more common than that. So something along those lines. Let's say you start off at a very small dose, 10 milligrams a day. Usually that's one tablet. So you have your own production of testosterone, and on top of that, you have 10 milligrams. You add in another, after, let's say, 3 weeks, you add in another 10 milligrams. So you have 20 milligrams now. By that time, your production will start to go down a bit, but you're also upping the dosage. So you're still above what you were previously. And let's say after 6 weeks, you may start to have, a pretty noticeable reduction in your own testosterone. You add another 10 milligrams of Anavar to make the difference. You're up to 30 milligrams of Anavar a day. You finish a 9-week course, you stop, and you let your natural production come back on, start to regain, good natural production, which will be pretty fast because orals also have a very short half-life. You will take a pill now, it will start working in a few hours. It will be out of your system in maybe a few days, depending on the compound. So your entire 9-week course is over. It'll take a few days for the anabolics to leave your system, and then you'll have your body will start bringing your natural production back online.
Awesome. So I think that's also like really awesome advice, just because also if you do have any sort of side effects that do crop up, because the half-life of the orals is short, you don't have to deal with having to wait like 4 weeks or 6 weeks for if you're taking a longer ester compound like an ethionate or a cypionate to get out of your system. And so
Right.
then also like everybody's different, like what Mircea said, some people can tolerate like a gram of test and they don't get any of these sides. Some people, they can't go above 200 milligrams and they get acne and all these other negative consequences. And then like also it just lets you like you said, dip your toes in it, see how you respond. You won't have life-changing results, most likely. I mean, some people will, because again, the individual variation is so massive. But you'll definitely notice some pretty good gains. And then just like what Mircea said, you'll have some suppression of your endogenous testosterone, but it shouldn't be anything that bad until it gets back online. So I did want to ask you, because you mentioned escalating dose throughout your course. That is definitely contrary to bro science, more what people do. So why would you do an escalating model over your course length, instead of a static model where you just start like, hey, I'm going to take 500 tests and 700 primo. I'm going to take that from day one. Well, why would you do something different?
That's a very good question. And to be completely honest, the example that you gave is more is a better example than the Anavar one. The Anavar one will be pretty much your testosterone goes down, so your dosage goes up to make the difference up. You'll still be in a slight positive, because your own production goes down. But in the example that you gave, yes, you're probably looking at somebody who's enhanced, maybe also on TRT. So their baseline testosterone is that 200 milligrams that you're injecting weekly. So why an escalating dose during a course? Well, Broderick likes to give the elevator button analogy. If you go into a hotel and you see an elevator, you want to go to the first floor, you push the button, call the elevator, all the gears start working, all the mechanisms, and you get one elevator. Next to you comes random gym bro, and he's all hopped up on Tren and Clen and whatever, and he's just pushing the fucking button 57 fucking times, and he's still getting the same elevator. So you're going to get the same elevator whether you push the button once or if you punch the button 50 times. It doesn't matter. You will still get growth regardless. Now, as you start going up in floors, you may need to push the button with a bit more pressure, need a bit more. You're going up. You don't need to push it, with 10 tons of pressure. You just need to apply a bit more pressure if the button's, let's say, pressure sensitive. Now, how does that translate into gear use? Well, the body doesn't need a lot of stimulus when it's at a baseline of 200 milligrams of testosterone or even natural. It doesn't need a lot of stimulus to grow. But as you start growing, as the gear starts turning, you will need more and more. Also, all drug use is sort of escalating because there is something called peak plasma concentration. You may inject 700 milligrams today, but if you keep doing that, during the weeks of a course, that peak plasma concentration builds up until about, let's say, 5 times the half-life. That's about the time that the drug reaches peak plasma concentration. So 5 applications. If you're taking a week-long product, let's say an enanthate product, primabol enanthate and testosterone enanthate, after 5 weeks, you'll probably reach peak plasma concentration of those drugs. So it's an escalation, even if you inject every week. This way, the escalation goes up a bit more, slower. Also, with this escalation of drug plasma concentration, you also would need an escalation in training stimulus. So volume of training goes up as milligrams go up. You should train up to your dosage or dose up to your training. Depends if you're Tom Platz or not. I think he needed the drugs that he took just to survive the training that he did. So that is a very good example of somebody who actually needed drugs just to survive his own wicked training. Now, getting back to why linear escalation is better. People will say, okay, yeah, but I want effects now. Cool. Will you get a lot more side effects if you take, 1 gram from day 1? Yes, you will. You will get the negative effects of 1 gram of gear, regardless of what combination that is, from day 1 to the final day of your course. If you escalate slowly, you'll get less side effects in the beginning, and you'll only get that 1 gram's worth of side effects towards the end. There's also something called fatigue. Fatigue is not just, you're tired from a hard day of work or from a training session. It's systemic fatigue. It can be fatigue related to your endocrine system, to your hormonal system, to your financial system. You can be, financially drained from just using that much gear from the beginning, during a 10, 12, 16, 20-week course.
Also injections.
So, yeah. Also, if you inject a gram of gear, depending on which compound it is, you can be looking at, 6 mils, 10 mils. That's a lot of injection volume. Those are a lot of sharp, pointy needles in your ass. So you will get tired of that. Trust me, you will get very tired of that very soon. Now, you're getting more side effects from the beginning. Also, your body will start to break down from having to deal with all these side effects, just over time. If you're slowly escalating the dose, you're providing enough stimulus to get growth at each dose escalation. And also you're getting the minimum side effects for that hypertrophic stimulus. You're losing less health and getting pretty much the same gains. I don't think that you're going to get a lot more out of a course if you're just slamming all the gear from the beginning to the end, and just at the midpoint, just your body will start to break down. You start to feel like shit. Your blood work will be terrible. I think that will even be worse because you may not even be able to finish the course from, side effects. Maybe you won't have, enough places to stick needles in. Maybe, you're going to get such a suppressed immune system that you'll be sick most of the time. There could be a lot of problems with taking gear, a lot of gear from the beginning and not escalating the dosage. Has this been done before? Yes. Have many bodybuilders done this? Yes. Is that the best way to do things? In my opinion, no.
Awesome. I think that's really insightful. So I guess going off of that, um is there a course max length that you would give somebody? And then what would determine also time off of a course? Now I know that, if I was talking to Broderick, he would say periodization, and I'm assuming you're going to say a similar thing. Um, but say like you're to do 2 courses in 1 year, 20 weeks on course, slowly escalating up until like about the midpoint, you hold milligrams the same. Then 6 weeks at your sports HRT, so 2 to 3 milligrams per kilogram to allow for that systemic stress to come down. Is there even, and like maybe you could potentially even, depending upon how you design your course, do 52 weeks, like just get a little bit of insight onto, I guess, determining course length and how much time off.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And course length will also be determined by your schedule. If if you have a deadline, that will pretty much be the be all end all of course design. You have to, reach that deadline. If you're a competitive powerlifter, bodybuilder, you have a show, that will determine many things. Now, the minimum course length also, it will be determined by your compound selection. If you're using fast acting esters like orals or something like an acetate, a propionate, a suspension, probably the shortest I would go is 6 weeks with orals. Anything below that is just preparatory hypertrophy. You're getting the body ready to hypertrophy. You're getting that water retention, that glycogen synthase. You're upregulating all these systems in the background, but you're not getting actual, contractile tissue accrual or very little thereof. You're probably going to be looking at 6 weeks with orals with something like an enanthate or a cypionate ester. I would say 10 to 12 weeks would be the absolute minimum, because it would take 5 weeks just for the drug to reach peak plasma concentration. So if you're going for 8 weeks, you're reaching peak plasma concentration by week 5. You're getting 3 to 4 weeks at that peak plasma concentration, which is not a lot. But maximum course length, again, with a long-acting ester, I would probably say anything from 16 to maximum 20 weeks. 20 weeks would be probably the cutoff, because at the 20-week point, something starts to break down. The wheels start to fall off the wagon. You're either going to be psychologically fatigued, financially, emotionally, or too beat up from too much training. Your body's too beat up from too many injections, or your body is just saying no. This is not okay. We're your liver enzymes go up, your EGFR goes down, your blood pressure goes up, all sort of funky stuff happens. For orals, Broderick has a very good rule of thumb. It's pretty much don't take more milligrams of orals than your body weight in kilograms, and don't take orals for more consecutive days than your body weight in kilograms. So if you're a 100 kilogram individual, don't take more than 100 milligrams a day, and don't take orals for more than 100 days, which is 13 weeks, I think.
Yeah, that's a long time. Like
yeah. There are also other considerations, but let's say for orals, anything from 6 weeks to pretty much your body weight in kilograms, then divided by 7, which are the days of the week. And for injectables, I would say at least 10, and probably the maximum would be 20.
Awesome. I like how you mentioned like just like there just becomes like points where just is like it's just too much stress, and not only like it's like you have to still train hard if you're doing that much gear, and I know like Broderick calls it the burden of that use, and as there's psychological side effects that do crop up, so taking time off is also really important. So Would that be kind of correlated with like, I know it's probably, it's all of this depends answer. Was that kind of just basically time off is directly correlated with time on?
Yes, I was my apology. I forgot to tackle that.
No,
So
you're okay. So sorry, just to follow up, like, because I know that you mentioned like a peak plasma concentration in 5 weeks. If you're taking like an ethane or cypionate, which you want to have at least 5 weeks off of that to get that done, and then with an oral, it could be even like less time potentially. Or yeah, those are my questions.
yeah, those are very good questions. The golden rule, so to say, and that was coined by Dan Duchesne. I think he was the first one to actually coin this one. Time on should usually mirror time off. So if you've been on for 10 weeks, take 10 weeks off. If you've been on for 20 weeks, take 20 weeks off. That should be the golden rule, the golden standard. You're pretty safe with this 1-to-1 ratio. Now, the minimum time to take off of drugs would probably be 50% of time on. So if you're on for 10 weeks, take at least 5 weeks off, which, as you mentioned, taking in an anti-cypionate ester, you're probably going to just barely get the drug out of your system, and then you're getting back on the drugs. So you're not going to get much of that natural production back online, but you're probably going to relieve your body of some of that drug burden. If you're taking drugs for 20 weeks and you're taking 20 weeks off, if you're going, off cold turkey and not going to a TRT or HRT, yeah, then you're probably going to have 15-ish weeks off. And those weeks will be, for some people, should be enough to get your natural production back online. If you're someone who wants to be, off of TRT, doesn't want to take testosterone for the rest of their lives, who values their natural production. Although I will ask a moral question: if you're happy with your natural production, then why are you taking drugs?
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I think it's especially once you go the route of injectables, it's kind of like a lifetime decision, in my opinion. You always could come off and go the path of Pete Rubish, but I mean, he's well documented the negative side effects of trying to regain, especially after years of abuse. Which is why, again, like, why we talk about safer use, but obviously it depends upon your goals. If you want to be an IFBB pro, you want to be Mr. Olympia, you're going to have a higher risk, and you need to be okay with that. Whereas if you are just somebody that wants to, just want to look a little bit better, go on like the beach, show off for your friends, maybe just like the oral route is enough for you.
Yeah,
So how do you know how much to take of anabolic load?
that is an excellent question. I really like that question. And I'm going to just go briefly over the concepts of TRT and sports, TRT, HRT, just so people understand that. So basically, medical TRT is around 0.5 to 1 milligrams per kilogram. So let's take a 100 kilogram individual, 220 pounds. That is between 50 and 100 milligrams of testosterone per week. What Broderick has coined as being sports TRT is 2 to 3 milligrams per kilogram. And that is the maximum dose of testosterone that one can use pretty much indefinitely without seeing significant downsides. So you can take 2 to 3 milligrams per kilogram pretty much the rest of your life without seeing much more negative side effects than you would be as taking, your 100 milligrams of testosterone TRT. So if we calculate for somebody who's taking injectable drugs, long-acting injectable drugs, if we take that into consideration, we already have 2 to 3 milligrams per kilogram. So 100 kilogram individual, 200 to 300 milligrams. I would say that the minimum amount of milligrams per kilogram that somebody should take to see benefits, hypertrophic benefits, actual sports performance hypertrophic benefits, would be about 5 milligrams per kilogram. So if you want to start a course, pretty much 5 milligrams per kilogram of compounds per week should be where you should start.
Awesome. And then just in terms of like escalation, that will probably depend upon history of exposure as well as results at that exposure.
Yes, yes. So unless you're somebody who has been, just literally abusing drugs for years and taking IFBB pro dosages without any reason, that your historic use will be valuable. I've worked with clients that came to me with a pretty absurd amount of gear use and actually cut down what they were taking, and they had better results and better health. So sometimes, your historic use is relevant. If you've been taking 2 grams of gear for the last 5 years, maybe going, you know, going down a bit in dosages would be beneficial. Escalation, it would depend on your goal. I think most, amateur, bodybuilders or recreational bodybuilders or powerlifters, about that 10 milligram per kilogram would be a good dose. If you're looking at being competitive at, let's say, state regional level, maybe going to that 15 milligram per kilogram, 15 to 20, you're probably looking at being an IFBB pro. And when you're looking at winning pro shows, in bodybuilding or powerlifting, that could probably be somewhere above 20 milligrams per kilogram. That cream of the crop, that genetic elite could get away with a lot more or a lot less. It depends completely on genetics, because when you're at the top of the game, you can take very little and get a lot, or you can tolerate a lot and survive a lot and get good results.
Sure. And I also think it's important to really be aware of, okay, is this actually getting me my desired results? Because you don't want to just take these, go on and go on a course, spend the time, spend the money, and not get the results that you are looking for. So again, obviously everything is going to reflect your own goals, your own needs. If you're trying to be Mr. Olympia, you're going to need more. If you're trying to win, the showdown powerlifting meet, you're probably going to need more milligrams.
Yeah.
Or something else that's going to like help make your gear work better, like growth hormone or carnitine, potentially.
Yes.
So I guess going off of that, in terms of like adding in ancillaries, so like when would you advise somebody to consider adding in a growth hormone to potentially help out the results? There's also a lot of lore around growth hormone where people will either it's like, I've heard Greg Doucette, for example, say it's the most overrated drug. And I've heard some like Israel say it has, that's the reason why IFBB pros are 50 pounds heavier right now than they were years ago. So when would you consider adding in growth hormone, and for what purposes?
Well, to address the 50 pounds heavier part, look at the time when growth hormone actually became available in its recombinant format, not the cadaver crest crumb human growth hormone that was literally just extracted from cadavers. That's about the time when bodybuilders got about 50 pounds heavier. So yeah, I think it works, but to get those extreme hypertrophic benefits, you'd probably need to take a lot of it. But going back to when should you implement growth hormone? Honestly, taking a small dose of growth hormone, something that would be the equivalent of sports TRT in growth hormone replacement therapy, or sports growth hormone replacement therapy, would be probably 2 IUs of growth hormone, 5 days a week, taking 2 days off. The 2 days off would be to mitigate water retention. It's enough time to alleviate the water retention you get from it and the neuropathy, the numbness in the fingers, but still get not all, but most of the positive effects from growth hormone. That's about 10 IUs a week. That's not a lot. There are people who take more than that one day. But that is more than your body will probably produce naturally at your peak growth hormone production, outside of, just being a baby and just growing like a weed. In your teen years, in your 20s, you're probably not going to produce 2 IUs a day on a constant basis. Growth hormone has a lot of benefits. It helps with pretty much everything in the body, but at that dosage, I would say that its main benefit would be bulletproofing you against injuries. It will help strengthen your joints. It will help, strengthen your tendons, your ligaments, lubricate the joints, add a bit of cushioning via water retention. It does have very potent healing properties. So growth hormone is very environmentally dependent. So if you have a lot of, let's say, damage done to a joint, the body will take growth hormone, break it down into the growth factors that your body needs to heal that particular area. So growth hormone and all peptides are very environmentally dependent. Now, because of this, bulletproofing your joints against injury, probably as soon as you can afford it, I would probably say, if you can afford it, take it. More works better. More also brings more side effects like water retention, numbness in the fingers, which can lead to long-term carpal tunnel syndrome. But when it comes to bulletproofing your joints against stupid training, I don't think anything beats growth hormone.
Yeah, I know that there's a reason why athletes nowadays can, like Tom Brady is still elite at 45.
Oh, 100%. All elite athletes now are in their like late 30s to early 40s, even mid 40s. You didn't see that like 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, and like that's why your favorite athlete is probably on drugs. It's just how it is. Let's not even go over like the opioids and painkillers that are in the NFL, what goes on at halftime in the NFL. Yeah. But I think that's basically like a really, really good thing. So obviously, and like I know there's studies basically it's like 1.5 IU for 100 kilos is about enough to bulletproof for or to get the lipolysis benefits. But obviously that's still going to be dependent upon caloric intake. You still can't you can't eat pizza and ice cream and 5,000 calories a day if your expenditure is 4,000 calories on growth. Right. You'll thermodynamics still apply, but it just kind of I like what you said about it makes everything work better. It's just I describe it as it's the preparatory for everything else, and then it makes your anabolic work a little bit better because it just makes all those processes just a little bit more upregulated.
Well, it does. It actually is a preparatory. It has preparatory properties. It enhances satellite cell proliferation. It prepares your satellite cells to become actual muscle cells. It does have that effect. It also, as you mentioned, lipolysis, growth hormone works, and 1.5 IUs works, just as 1.5 IUs should work. Growth hormone's initial action in the body is actually catabolic. So it liberates substrate into the bloodstream. Glycogen, it liberates triglycerides, even amino acid. It liberates substrate into the bloodstream. Now, if you would take that in the morning and do, precious morning fasted cardio, you're going to burn those substrates that have been liberated. So if you take it in the AM with fasted cardio, it will have that lipolytic effect would be more prominent. If you take it at night, which is when your body usually produces growth hormone, that liberation of substrate, that preparatory mechanism, that synthesis of growth factors of IGF-1, MGF, necrotic tumor factor in the liver, all those will lead to nighttime, you rest, you recover, you sleep, growth hormone is released or injected exogenously. Your body repairs damaged tissue, muscle from training or joints. You wake up, you are repaired, so you can go again.
Awesome. Yeah. A lot of it depends upon environment. I guess with the water retention symptoms, Are those something that goes away with more repeated exposure, or is that something that's always kind of going to be there regardless of how habituated you are to the effects?
It's highly individual. Usually, the more experience you have with growth hormone, the less these side effects will affect you. So, first time I ever used it, I just took 1.8 IUs of the Pfizer Genotropin, the actual pharmaceutical grade Pfizer pen, and I got neuropathy so bad that I had to stop it because I couldn't sleep at night. This hand was burning, like from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. the next day. This hand was burning. I was waking up and my hand was looking like a baseball glove. So that's 1.8 IUs. Now, after that course, I can literally take 3 times that much and not get side effects nearly as severe. My body weight went up, but I also had more exposure to the growth hormone. So I had more practice with it. And my body seems to not get so many negative effects, but it still gets the benefits, the positives, and those are up to a certain IU threshold. They're more in the background. After you reach a certain threshold, those effects start to be more visible. You see them faster, and they're more noticeable as a whole.
Awesome. Yeah. So probably I know on the member site there's one interview with Rodon Dubois or whatever his last name is.
Oh, Rod Dubois, yes.
Yeah, he really actually, like Roderick says, like start like 1 IU and then slowly like titrate up to like 2, like depending upon like symptoms, similar to how you would with any sort of anabolic. Well, awesome. I really think that's a really good overview of just a little bit safer use considerations to make how AAS work. So I wanted to just really thank you so much for coming on and donating your time. If people want to find you, maybe hire you for a consultation or coaching, how should they do so?
Well, the best way is to Team Evil GSP. That's teamevilgsp.com. You will find coaching section where there are all the Team Evil GSP coaches, Broderick, myself, and Scott Habermill. You can find me there. You can find me if you want to become a member of teamevilgsp.com. There is the membership site, members.teamevilgsp.com, where you'll find tons of hours of interviews and podcasts with Broderick, with myself, with a lot of other contributors, big names in coaching, both bodybuilding and powerlifting, strongman. There are tons of articles on performance enhancing drugs. There are articles on MMA, strongman, powerlifting, bodybuilding, track and field. Tons of information there on each PED, and also some funnier podcasts with Broderick and Dave Crossan from the UK. So if you want to find me, I'll be there. I'm usually there. If you want to find me on Instagram, I'm at MIRCA BJR. That's Mircea BJR. And pretty much that's it. You can find me there. I'm mostly on the membership side. So that's the best way to contact me if you want to.
Also, I'll make sure I include all those in the show notes so people can just easily go there. But again, thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the Adam Peter Fitness Podcast. I'll talk to you guys in the next one.